Today we are very happy to have Umbule Mador from Nigeria presenting at Friday for Birds. Umbule completed her master's degree in conservation biology in APLORI in Nigeria, and now she's currently working with butterfly research team and also the Nocturnal Avian Ecology Lab, also at APLORI. And I heard she was also involved in the Nigerian Bird Atlas project. So she's active in many things, also involved in educational conservation program. So I'm very excited to see and hear her talk today that will focus on birds, butterfly, and human, apparently. Maybe I will just do a very brief summary in French for the French-speaking people. Donc aujourd'hui, on a une présentation de Umbule de APLORI au Nigeria, du Nigeria, pardon. Elle va présenter son travail sur les oiseaux, les papillons et les humains, comme c'est indiqué dans le titre. Donc on se réjouit beaucoup de sa présentation. Et je vais faire la traduction en français à la fin.
Thank you very much. So just like I was earlier introduced, I am an alumnus of Mador and I'm currently working together with research. And my talk will be titled with insights from Nigerian urban. So when we talk about urban greenspaces, we definitely have to talk about urbanization. And urbanization is simply a shift in human population from rural to urban areas. Now, this usually causes concentration of population into distinct areas, resulting in land transformation, several populations, such as residential, commercial, industrial, agricultural, or even transportation. Now, this ultimately impacts the natural landscape. Now, there are two major causes for urbanization, mainly high population density. Increased population density and human activity are actually, personally, I consider them as more often than not, they result in destruction of natural habitat and displacement of wildlife. Now, however, despite all of this, greenspaces are actually considered a glimmer of hope for urban areas because they are considered potential hotspots in that they serve as habitats to provide food resources and economic services. Also, greenspaces equally improve human well-being through visual activities, social interaction, noise reduction, and removal of air pollution. Now, why should we care about all of this? Generally, urbanized areas in West Africa have been little studies in terms of what might affect urban biodiversity. Plastics, which is the study site here, is home to numerous indigenous and endangered plants and animals. However, decades of pressure from human activities have caused significant contributions to natural landscape. It also is the next appearance of the native woodland. Now, this loss of native woodland and native vegetation plays a very big role. And also, sadly, most protected areas within the Southern states will be some of 90%. And these 90% are primarily located in urban, in rural regions. Sadly, most of the protected areas within the national ecoregion sum up to about 9%, and most of these 9% are primarily located in rural areas. So most biodiversity research and conservation efforts that have been conducted in the state during the past decade have actually favored rural areas over cities, and these cause more urban. Now, we want to ask why birds and butterflies. Over the years, researchers have found birds and butterflies to be valuable indicators of changes in science and statistics, and they are equally known to respond sensitively to issues of overpopulation. Now, this makes them a very good trusted target for other ones. vertebrates, and vertebrates alike. Therefore, understanding how birds and butterfly communities are related to characteristics of urban green spaces is key to promoting management plans as well as biodiversity conservation in urban areas with the classical and Nigeria. Now, humans generally place value on a space based on their perceptions and attached to it. And so, perceptions are crucial for interpreting and assigning meaning to the environment. Therefore, understanding the factors that drive physical variations, urban green spaces, will aid management practices to maximize the benefits of urban green spaces, both wildlife and for humans as well. Now, this study aimed to investigate the key corridors of abundance and richness, and also to see if these drive physical variations in 30 different urban spaces within Nigeria. Now, we have two questions. The first was, what green characteristics will be spread and multiplied with abundance and richness? And we classify these green characteristics.
The first was, what green space characteristics predict bird and butterfly species abundance and richness? And we classified these green space characteristics into three. First, vegetation and landscape variables, weather variables, and anthropogenic variables. And to answer this first question, first, this is a map of Nigeria showing Plateau State and the 30 different green spaces we studied. Now, the green spaces were situated within 3 local governments of the state. And then we identified 3 green space land use types, which we used, and they were namely parks, gardens, and golf courses. This study was conducted in 30 different urban green spaces, and these green spaces were of varying sizes. Now, most of the green spaces had very small area. Therefore, as a criterion, a green space was selected if a minimum of 50 meters could be covered. Each green space had just one transect, which was further divided into several 50-meter sections. Therefore, the total number of sections in every transect or a site, so to say, depended on the total area of the green space. So to answer the first question, bird surveys were conducted using the line transect technique. In each study site, transects were walked along pre-existing trails. Bird data was collected in the mornings and evenings, and all birds seen and heard were recorded. Butterflies, on the other hand, were surveyed using the pollard walk method, and the same transects as were used for birds were used to sample butterflies between 9 a.m. in the morning and 12 p.m. in the afternoon. You would earlier recall I said that green space characteristics were classified into 3, vegetation and landscape variables. Now, these vegetation and landscape variables were collected into 10 by 10 meter quadrats at every 15-meter section of a transect. Weather variables, which included temperature, humidity, and wind speed, were collected at site level, extracted from the NASA database using the site's coordinates. And then lastly, anthropogenic variables, which included number of buildings, noise level, and number of people encountered, were counted or measured at every 50-meter section of a transect. Now, for question 1, generalized linear mixed models with family Poisson were developed via GLM-ER function to test the effect of green space characteristics on bird and butterfly abundance and richness, and site was used as a random effect to deal with repeated measures and variable effort. Now, for bird abundance and richness, we found a total of 2,214 individual birds of 104 species belonging to 45 families. And the Jos Wildlife Park had the greatest bird abundance of 307 and the greatest richness of 52. On the other hand, Millennium Garden had the least bird abundance of 7 and the least bird species richness of 4. More bird species were recorded in areas with water bodies, and this aligns with previous research showing that water bodies enhance avian communities in urban environments. And this is because the presence of water bodies is benefiting for both water and land birds because it reflects increased habitat heterogeneity and available resources, and as well reduced human disturbance or intensive management. More bird species were equally recorded in areas with more rocky outcrop. And just like the water bodies, areas with more rocky outcrop are actually less modified or disturbed and are relatively more natural. Therefore, several species, especially rock nesters, tend to utilize these areas more. Contrary to the long-standing species-area relationship, which typically applies to urban green spaces as well, this study recorded fewer bird species in larger green spaces. The findings of this study suggest that the relationship between green space area and bird species abundance and richness is complex and could be influenced by habitat quality, as smaller green spaces with high quality habitats supported proportionately higher species richness, while some larger green spaces, which were mostly golf courses, had lower bird species richness and abundance, indicating lower habitat quality. Now, increasing noise levels in the urban green spaces were found to be significantly linked to a decrease in bird species richness and abundance. And this aligns with prior research indicating that noise levels negatively impact terrestrial wildlife, with most effects observed from about 40 to 50 decibels, which potentially affects bird communication. Now, this study highlights that noise is a substantial predictor of bird species abundance and richness. And although some species may actually adapt to urban noise, it can still have adverse effects on bird diversity, especially in areas with higher noise levels. Other significant predictors of bird abundance were number of people encountered, number of trees, percentage ground cover. Now, the presence of people was significantly linked to a decrease in bird species abundance, and this highlights the direct impact of human interactions on birds, including physical disturbance and changes in noise levels. The presence of more trees in green spaces was positively linked to higher bird abundance, while a greater percentage of ground cover or open areas had a negative impact on bird abundance. Now, all of this emphasizes the importance of trees in supporting bird populations with increased food and nesting resources. Open ground cover or open areas, on the other hand, however, poses potential threats to bird abundance as seen through less resource availability and high predation risks. Now, for butterfly abundance and richness, we found a total of 1,024 individual butterfly individuals of 54 species belonging to 5 families. The Rhino Golf Course had the greatest butterfly abundance of 295, and Jos Wildlife Park had the greatest butterfly richness of 26. Jardin Garden, on the other hand, had the least butterfly abundance of 1 and richness of 1 also. A positive correlation was observed between percentage grass cover and both butterfly abundance and richness, possibly due to the fact that certain butterfly species, particularly within the families Hesperidae, Lichenidae, and Peridae, rely on grasses as food source and also larval hosts. And these 2 families, Hesperidae and Lichenidae, were actually the most abundant and species rich during the course of this study, possibly contributing to the positive relationship we had with grass cover. Other predictors of butterfly abundance were tree height and grass height. Now, both tree height and grass height had a negative impact on butterfly abundance, likely because increased heights of trees and grass can reduce visual detectability of butterflies. So ultimately, from our results, although most green spaces are small in size and are susceptible to high noise levels and human traffic, it ultimately tells us that green spaces with more water bodies, rocky outcrop, and vegetation such as trees and grass cover may support higher bird and butterfly abundance and richness. And also, proper management of green spaces at site scale has the potential to increase biodiversity of the urban environment. Now, you'd recall I said we had 2 questions which we answered. Now, the second question was, do visitors' valuation of a green space depend on the bird and butterfly species abundance and richness of that green space? To answer this question, the visitor valuation was assessed through questionnaire surveys based on visit frequency, access fee payments, and travel distance by respondents. The questionnaire comprised mainly of closed questions and a few open-ended ones. And then the total number of questionnaires that were administered varied across sites because some sites actually had a higher number of visitors coming in as compared to others. Generalized linear mixed models with family binomial were developed via a GLM-ER function to test the effect of species abundance and richness on visitor valuation. And site, again, was used as a random effect here to deal with repeated measures and variable effort. Now, a total of 285 questionnaires were administered, but then we had a total of 222 which were returned. And of these 222 that were returned, 98 were completely filled and 124 were incompletely filled. And then of the 222 questionnaires we had that were returned and were filled, a total of 219 respondents were Nigerians. And then we had most of the respondents were males, and most of the respondents fell between the age group of 18 to 30 years. And also most of our respondents had already attained their tertiary education. And then lastly, most of the respondents, again, were workers. But then for our results, we found that visitor valuation did not depend on species, bird and butterfly species abundance and richness. So while species richness and abundance can contribute to the overall appeal of a green space, the findings of this study actually suggest that other factors such as overall green space management, visitor expectations, and other cultural or personal influences may have played a more significant role in determining how visitors valued these spaces. So ultimately, the main factors driving visitors' perceived value of urban green spaces in Plateau State may not be directly related to wildlife. Therefore, future studies should prioritize identification of important green space variables that do align with human preferences and that also benefit wildlife. So going forward, vegetation structure and complexity, especially native species, should be improved in order to promote food and nesting resources for both birds and butterflies. Also, water bodies and rocky outcrops should be maintained within habitat patches and carefully managed in order to preserve high-quality remnants of natural vegetation. And lastly, biodiversity education programs should prioritize strengthening the connection between visitors and wildlife within green spaces in order to help foster a stronger connection between visitors and the natural world. I acknowledge Dr. A.P. Leventis for funding this project, my 3 supervisors, Professor Will Cresswell, Dr. Sam Ivandi, and Dr. Grace Palm, for their guidance and significant contributions towards the completion of this study, and then to all the green space managers for allowing us to access data within their spaces and for their support during the study, and also to the director and scientific director of APLORI for ensuring that we got the funding for this study as at when due, and for providing all the equipment and technical support that we used for this study, and also to all the research associates of APLORI for their input towards the success of this study. Thank you for listening.
Donc, je vais faire un résumé assez court en français de la présentation. Donc, son travail se focalisait, comme on l'a vu, sur l'effet de l'urbanisation sur principalement les papillons et les oiseaux au Nigeria. Elle a vite rapidement introduit toutes les problématiques associées à l'urbanisation, la transformation de l'habitat et tous les autres effets comme la pollution, d'autres effets anthropogéniques, etc. Assez vite, elle s'est focalisée sur les espaces verts en milieu urbain et comment, en fait, manager et améliorer ces espaces verts pour qu'ils puissent bénéficier au mieux les oiseaux et les papillons. Donc, elle a fait des recensements en utilisant la méthode des transects, des recensements d'oiseaux et des papillons. Elle a aussi pris des variables concernant la végétation, la météo et d'autres variables anthropogéniques comme le nombre d'habitants dans cette zone. Aussi la couverture la proportion de, je ne sais pas comment on a calculé ça exactement, mais de bâtiments, etc. Du coup, d'abord, elle s'est focalisée sur l'étude sur les oiseaux. Elle a montré que les plans d'eau, les zones rocheuses et le nombre d'arbres avaient un effet positif sur les oiseaux. Elle conclut que du coup, en augmentant l'hétérogénéité de ces habitats, on arrive à favoriser les oiseaux dans ces milieux, dans ces espaces verts, dans les milieux urbains. Elle a montré par contre que d'autres variables avaient des effets négatifs, plutôt des variables liées à l'activité humaine, comme le bruit. Plus il y avait de bruit, moins il y avait d'oiseaux, ou aussi le nombre d'habitants. Et quelque chose un peu de surprenant, contrairement à ce qui est d'habitude attendu, d'habitude on s'attend à qu'il y ait une relation positive entre la taille d'un habitat, la taille d'un patch et le nombre d'espèces qu'on y trouve. Sauf qu'elle a trouvé le contraire. Plus ces espaces verts étaient grands, moins il y avait d'oiseaux. Donc elle a un peu pointé du doigt que ces relations étaient très complexes et qu'il faut prendre plein de paramètres en compte. Ensuite, elle nous a parlé des papillons. Alors, les papillons, eux, ils étaient favorisés par la couverture d'herbacées qui leur donne plus d'opportunités pour se nourrir, plus de ressources et aussi peut-être plus de types, plus d'endroits pour avoir les hôtes de leurs larves pour certaines espèces de papillons. Par contre, les papillons diminuaient quand les arbres ou l'enherbement était trop haut. Elle a comme hypothèse que ça réduit peut-être l'activité de ces papillons. Donc, pour la partie biodiversité, elle conclut vraiment, elle souligne l'importance de ces structures comme les plans d'eau, comme les zones plutôt rocheuses, comme les arbres et les prairies, les zones herbacées qu'il faut préserver du coup. Ensuite, elle a voulu voir si les visiteurs de ces espaces verts en milieu urbain, ils pouvaient choisir ces espaces et leur attribuer une valeur en fonction de l'abondance des papillons et des oiseaux qu'on y trouvait. Donc pour ça, elle a fait des questionnaires, plus de 200 questionnaires. Elle a vite montré un peu la répartition des gens qui ont répondu aux questionnaires. C'était principalement des gens de nationalité nigérienne, plutôt des hommes jeunes et qui étaient bien éduqués puisqu'ils travaillaient dans des milieux tertiaires. Par contre, malheureusement, elle n'a trouvé aucune relation entre la valeur attribuée à ces milieux par les gens qui ont fait le questionnaire et l'abondance des oiseaux et des papillons qu'il y a trouvé. Donc, elle conclut un peu en disant qu'il faut vraiment maintenant trouver des sortes de synergies pour favoriser la biodiversité dans ces milieux, dans ces espaces verts en milieu urbain, et à la fois que ces mesures elles soient aussi appréciées par les visiteurs Et tout ça augmenterait la connexion que du coup les habitants des villes ont avec la nature et pourrait avoir des effets bénéfiques au-delà de simplement ces espaces verts en milieu urbain.